Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Beluski, and as promised, the return of our special guest. How are you today, John?
Hey, I am good. I am enriched by our last episode with Greg and Rachelle Colegrove on marriage, and boy, what a great episode! We talked about the number two issue being reported by over 12,000 counseling and coaching sessions in an 18-month stretch. The number two issue was marriage, both from a
Yeah,
preventive and a therapeutic or a healing perspective. And we talked in 250 about some of the factors that are contributing to the marital challenges that pastors and their spouses face. Greg mentioned finances and the stress associated with that, just
yeah,
the reality of being co-vocational and the time stress that puts on many leaders. An interesting idea around spiritual warfare was pushed up on, and I
yeah.
thought that was a really meaningful part of our conversation. That when we work on marriage, when we want to talk, teach, help, and pastors want to work on their marriage, there is warfare that surrounds that because it's such well. And Rochelle put it this way: she said it's a representation of our relationship, of the relationship between Christ and His church, and so it makes sense that the devil would attack
Yeah.
there. We talked about how we could address some of these contributing factors. And Rochelle mentioned getting curious, like, why don't I have close friends? What Greg mentioned, what baggage am I bringing into the marriage? I would offer this, that one of the factors, one of the things we can do to address those contributing factors is to get outside help, whether
Okay.
that be marriage counseling, a marriage conference. Sometimes a coach can, and I think coaching really kind of helps on the preventive side of the world. And
Yeah.
but don't try to do this by yourself. And so I know I'm kind of giving a short synopsis of 250 and not doing it justice. So if you haven't listened to 250, pause this one, go back and listen to 250 first. But I'd like to jump right into our conversation today with Greg and Rachelle. Guys, thanks for being back. We
Thank
really
you.
Yeah.
appreciate it. Um, so let's just hit this question. If a pastor and their spouse find themselves in marital crisis,
Yeah.
what would you guys say are the next two or three steps they can take?
Good question.
So the first thing they should do is not do nothing.
Hmm.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I know that that seems like the easiest thing to do. Like
Mm,
it'll go away. It'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be all right. Eventually it'll just go away. That's not true.
Mm.
So I think the first step is to do something, to recognize I need to actually make a different choice. Um, and then, I mean, there's so many good places people can go for help. One of the places is Hope Restored, which is part of Focus on the Family. They have marriage intensives that I think I used to do therapy for them for like 8 years, and it's amazing. It's an amazing place to go. They do their best to make it affordable for pastors. I talked to one of the VPs a couple of weeks ago at one of our events, and he was like, if I could make it free for every pastor, I would. So it's not free for pastors now, but they really want to make that affordable.
Sure.
So that kind of counseling, obviously, then Focus on the Family also has just a counseling referral service. You can go to their website and find that. So I do think people that are truly in crisis, um, and what I always define that basically as anything you haven't been able to solve by yourself in the last 6 months.
mm.
Okay.
If
I
you've
would say
went
that's
6 months and you're still fighting about an issue, it's a crisis. You
Right.
are allowing that to keep you from being intimate with your spouse, having a good relationship with your spouse. That is exactly what the enemy wants. And so if there's just been something around finances or children or
Hmm.
sexuality that you're fighting about and you cannot get help with, it's time to do that. I specialize in, and occasionally I have openings I specialize in helping pastors and their wives recover from affairs and pornography addiction. I mean, that's the two things I mainly work with. And also just in the area of sexuality, because I am a sex therapist. Sometimes I'll help couples that are just struggling in their intimate life, cannot seem to make that healthy.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, we had referenced that data from those 12,000 sessions with pastors. The number 3 issue was addiction,
Right.
porn and alcohol addiction
Right.
as well. Just
Right.
as a point of information there.
But that all sounds
Yeah.
like it comes together, doesn't it? That the burnout, marriage issues, and what we turn to when we're
Yes.
miserable to get
Medicated,
some
yeah.
relief, some pleasure, some relief. Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
like marriage is the place where if things aren't working, it's unignorable.
Yeah.
A loving God gives us the ability to feel pain because it tells us something's wrong and where it's
Yeah.
located so we can do something about it. So what I'm hearing you say is if something's wrong and you're in pain, the next thing is to do something about it. And that is reaching out.
Right.
I like the thought of reaching out to a stranger who's a professional, a ministry who is well respected, but I have no connection to, instead of reaching out to the deacon board, for example. We're having marriage problems. Who knows what happens next, right? But to say to somebody that has no authority over you, will never repeat the story to somebody that has no connection to you, but they love the same Jesus you love, they use the same Bible you believe, and they're going to use this as a basis to resolve these issues. I think that is a next step, is a brilliant piece of advice.
Yeah. I will make one caveat to sexual addiction or pornography addiction, is I feel like there's people who specialize in that who are better than others. And so I usually recommend that people go to Faithful and True in Minnesota. It's one of the places I recommend consistently because Mark and Debbie Lacer, Mark is now in heaven, but they founded that probably 25 years ago and have helped hundreds and hundreds of people and pastors and leaders with particularly pornography and, and sex addiction. So, because I think that's such a big issue. Porn to me is probably the biggest issue that I'm seeing in marriage across the board, and in ministry marriages.
Yeah. Greg, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would just say that anybody sitting in your pews, I would say it's not just pastors. It's the church in general. I would say it's the biggest problem in church life today that nobody wants to talk about. We just kind of hide, pretend like it does. So we all walk in this cloud of darkness, and where's a safe place to talk? Where's somewhere that I can actually get free? And I think that if nothing is done, it will have the biggest impact on the church of tomorrow than anything else.
Wow.
And Greg, is it starting with talking about it? I mean, where do we start in the church setting? Because there's so much shame around this subject. How do we break the ice, so to speak, or get the ball moving in it with some good momentum?
Yeah, I think that accountability part, finding a friend that you can that is going to accept you, and all the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it starts there. I've been in circles with pastors that you think they don't want to talk about it. And here I am trying to steer a conversation a certain way. And there's pastors out there that just feel so trapped that to find a safe place to talk about it, it's kind of like the whole mask of shame comes off, because you realize I'm not the only one that's struggling in this area. There's other people who are just like me. And once something has been exposed, that's your first step to getting getting free.
I think one of the things that prevents pastors from talking about it, if I'm a carpenter and have a drinking problem or an anger problem or a pornography problem, I can still go drive a nail tomorrow. But as a pastor, it's all or nothing. It feels like the marriage, the ministry, the kids, the divorce, the public shame, the reproach on the gospel. You can see why somebody would say, I'll deal with it. And I hope I never get caught, and I'll just deal with it. What would you say to somebody right now that's really in that place? What is the reason for them to risk all of that, to come out of that and stop believing the lie that, when I get married, it won't be a problem anymore. When I get older, it won't be a problem anymore. As if it's, the problem with lust is it's insatiable. It's never satisfied. If I'm hungry and I eat, I get full. If I'm filled with lust and I submit to pornography, it doesn't get satisfied. It gets stronger. It's a very different animal. So what do you say to somebody that's stuck right now in that place?
Well, I would really, really encourage them to look down the road. I know people think, and every pastor that I've ever sat with that has either gotten caught or eventually confessed, they all say to me, I just didn't have anybody to talk to. I just didn't know. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know where to go. But I heard you guys say at the end of our last session, call us. Like, we're not going to be judgmental. We're open arm, want to hear your story, want to hear what's going on. That's the same for me. And there's other therapists out there. I just think I always tell people, if you could have gotten free by yourself, you would have already done so.
Good point. Right.
You would have already done so. I mean, how many times have you been to the altar and repented and say, I will never do that again, until the next time you're lonely, or the next time you're overwhelmed, or the next time you're up late at night and you can't sleep. And so I'm just saying, really to move forward. And there's people and ministries and places where people can go, and it doesn't mean a death sentence to their ministry. Now, I've walked it with lots of people who have walked through restoration, and been out of ministry for a season. But even that, eventually they're glad.
Yeah. I would throw in here, I mean, there's so many ways we could go with this conversation, but every relationship is built on trust and safety. Everyone. You cannot go deep in a relationship if there's not trust.
Right.
And when we go down that road of pornography, you're really breaking safety. You're breaking trust. And it's going to affect you not just in your marriage, but it also affects you in your own spiritual journey with Jesus.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think we were going to take this much time on this subject, but I think it's super important. And it's complicated. And I think the role complicates it. Like Jim said, if you were a carpenter, it'd be much easier because it wouldn't necessarily influence your living, your wage necessarily. And for pastors, it can be extremely risky. I believe that a burden shared is half a burden.
Yep.
And so when it comes to addiction, that's a burden too heavy for one person to carry by themselves. Paul tells us in Galatians, bear one another's burdens. And the Greek word for burdens there is bare, and it means a burden too heavy for one person to carry. And so pastors, we appeal to you to come out of hiding, so to speak, and find a safe space where you can unload this burden so that you have somebody helping you shoulder it together. I think that's the only hope. I mean, I believe that's the only hope for this, right? That if it's not shared, there's really very little hope in getting well. Now, I know we're running up against time. Jim, you've got a question, and then we're going to have to wrap up. And I tell you what, these last two sessions have gone by faster than probably almost any sessions we've done, because you guys are just so fascinating to listen to about this particular area. Jim, fire away.
Our marriage being one of the foundational relationships of ministry. So our ministry to the Lord, our ministry to our spouse, to our children, to a congregation, there's a certain, descending order. There's a certain flow to that. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of having a solid marriage as it pertains to, I have to, the church needs my time, my spouse doesn't. Wait a minute, maybe the best thing you can do for your church is to take care of your marriage. Is that a true statement? And if so, could you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, why don't you talk about that, babe?
Yeah, I am sitting here in front of you right now. I am totally convinced because of three things. One was the conversion experience of my grandma and her
Yeah.
influence and impact on me. Second was at some point in my life, I went from having this fear of God, the fear that I'm going to hell, to understanding that God loves me, period. That was one of the most freeing things of my entire life. But thirdly, and I would put it up there just as important as the first two, was having come from a broken family. I got to hang out at my pastor's home and watch him treat his wife right. I am serving God today because of the strength of a
Beautiful.
pastor and his wife's marriage. I saw Christ in that, and I said, this is what I want. When it comes to just the whole mindset of life, you can tell yourself, well, I don't want to be in a broken home, but the more you think about what you don't want to be, that's where you're going to gravitate towards.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
thankful as I look back going, I didn't have that mentality. I saw my pastor and said, that's what I want. And I'm a product of that. So, man, this whole piece of getting it right as the pastor and making your marriage your priority,
Yeah.
I cannot overstate it. Church will be there. People will be there. They'll always have more needs, but you only get one wife. You only get one husband.
Right.
And scripture tells us that you're going to leave and you get to cleave. Leave your parents, cleave to your mate. It doesn't say that you're going to cleave to your church. As a pastor, it doesn't say you're going to cleave to your children, your hobbies.
Right.
This is till death do us part.
Can I
Love
share
it.
a personal example?
Yeah.
Please.
So when we were young in marriage, we were in a small church and we had little kids, and we had always made it a priority to go on a date every week. But it got really hard. We were single income, one car. It was just tough. And I said to Greg one week, I said, we just cannot afford to go on a date this week. And he said, what do you mean we can't afford to go on a date? He goes, it's not a cost, it's an investment.
Mm.
And a cost is something you spend and it's gone. An investment is something that pays off later. So as we sit here 38 years later, still married and really more in love with each other than we've ever been, I'm like, thank God that Greg got it a long time ago. And dates don't have to be expensive, and time together doesn't have to be expensive. But we do need to make it a priority. And I'm so thankful that from the beginning of our marriage, Greg has really made that a priority, even when we were pastoring a very small church and very financially strapped.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to piggyback off of that as well. This is one piece that we talk about at all of our marriage retreats, is this whole piece of being proactive in your good self-care.
Yeah.
Because when we first got married, we had to backtrack and go back to what was our original design purpose for marriage. Probably 25 years into our marriage, we had this wake-up call that it's not your job to make me happy. It's not your job to make me complete. Only Christ can do both of those. And what we have discovered really over these last 10, 12 years, and Jim, of course, or John, I should say, got this when they came to the marriage piece, our marriage retreat, was we really go into your marriage is only as strong as the two people in it. And if I take care of myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, I bring something to the marriage. So I'm putting something into it. I'm not just taking from it.
Right.
And that has been such a huge shift of how we do marriage, what our marriage looks like, and it's so much more enjoyable.
Mhm.
Well,
Well,
our
guys,
time is expired, right?
yeah, go ahead,
we're,
Jim.
we're at the end of it. But
Wrap us up.
please, again, if someone wanted you to come, or they want to get a hold of you, give us your contact information so we can continue the conversation.
So if you'll go to funmarriageworkshop.com, that's our website. And also it's RachelleColegrove@gmail.com or GregColegrove@gmail.com because we have unique names.
Yeah. Yes.
Our phone numbers are on there, and a phone call would be great.
Mhm.
Wonderful, wonderful. And John, thanks for having these two on. I see what you've seen in them through the years. That it's funny, you don't make it sound easy, as in like it's not gonna require any effort, but you make it discernible and understandable enough. You go, okay, I think I can understand how to take that next step or what that next step might be. And there's hope in that. So thank you for bringing hope to our listeners and our watchers, and God bless you, our watchers and listeners and our guests. And John, you together, we're going to make it if we're not careful. Together and as a community, as friends, as pastors, we're going to make it. And that's God's will. Is not just that we would make it, but life would be abundant. And so the blessing of marriage is part of his plan for an abundant life. And if it's stuck, you described that crises as a problem that has not been solved in the last 6 months. If you're there, you're in crises. What do you do next? You reach out. You buy a book, you go to a seminar, you go to a retreat, you reach out to Converge, you reach out to Fund Marriage. Whatever you do it now, because what's going to change in the next 6 months if you don't start changing it today? And that answer is a scary one. So let's get it right. Let's enjoy our marriages. I have been happily married for 34 years. The problem is I've been married for 35, but there was a problem, but we fixed it. We worked hard, we fought for it. And now 35 years later, we have no regrets that we fought for that first year of marriage. So God bless you, our watchers and listeners. We're cheering for you. This episode drops on a Tuesday. If you're still listening on a Tuesday, that means you didn't resign on Monday, which makes you a winner. God bless you as you continue to lead from alignment.